In the heart of Northwest Indiana, where factories whistle once marked the shift change and neighborhoods line the edges of Lake County's historic towns, a new kind of campaign is underway. From Highland to Griffith, Schererville to St. John, voters are asking the same question. Who will fight for the working families in Indianapolis? Tonight, we sit down with a lifelong Lake County native, community advocate, and union leader who says he's ready to bring that fight to the state house. Welcome to Hold 'em Accountable, the show where we dig deeper into the ideas, values, and plans shaping our communities. Today, we turn our focus to Indiana's first state Senate district. This sprawling district includes parts of Lake County, from the industrious streets of Highland and Griffith to growing families of Schererville and St. John. Our guest today is Scott Houldieson, a Democratic candidate running to represent this district in the Indiana State Senate. Scott is a lifelong resident of Lake County, raised in Griffith and living in Highland for more than 2 decades, a community advocate and United Auto Workers member for over 36 years. He says his priority is standing up for working families and bringing a working class voice to the state house. Scott, thanks for being here.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity for folks to hear what I have to say, and you're bringing that opportunity to hold them accountable, and I'm all with holding them accountable.
We love hearing that. Let's get into this. NWI sits at the crossroads of industry, logistics, and residential growth. What do you see as the biggest economic challenge facing District 1 right now? And how would you balance job growth with quality of life concerns in places like Griffith and Highland?
Well, as you well know, the affordability in our country and in this county are some of the biggest issues facing working families. They're stuck between high costs and low wages, making it harder to make ends meet from one day to the next. So this is all because of the corporate capture of our state government. And, as you can see from my hat, I'm a Bears fan. A bill just passed out of the Appropriations Committee that's aimed at enticing the Chicago Bears to come to Northwest Indiana. Hopefully, our legislators are considering the costs and economic impact that, will taxpayers be left holding the tab for this? How will it affect already congested traffic corridors? What are the environmental impacts? So, there's a lot of unanswered questions. But, when it comes down to it, the problem is the corporate capture of our state government, leaving working families in the dust.
Property taxes and housing affordability are a growing concern, especially in fast-growing communities like Schererville and St. John. What specific steps would you support at the State House to provide relief without cutting funding for schools and local services?
That's a great question. In essence, we need a fairer tax structure. We over-rely on property taxes, sales taxes, and flat income taxes that make it harder for Hoosiers, especially low-income Hoosiers. We need progressive income taxes and progressive business taxes so that when the companies and the people that reap the greatest benefits from our state pay their fair share. Cleveland Cliffs was just granted a lower tax assessment by the Department of Local Government Finance without the input of the Lake and Porter County assessors. So why are corporations being granted these tax breaks without the input of the assessors? Why are their assessments being changed without even consulting with them? That's just bonkers to me. So we need to change the tax structure to make it fairer. We need to involve the parties. There should be an appeals process, but it should allow the assessors that assess those properties to give the reasoning for that appeal instead of a unelected board being able to just grant whatever the corporation wants.
Transportation and infrastructure are daily realities here. Rail congestion, truck traffic, flooding, and aging roads. What infrastructure priorities would you push for District 1, and how would you make sure the region isn't overlooked in Indianapolis?
Well, again, we need smart growth. When we expand growth into undeveloped areas, often we're taking up wetlands that protect us from flooding. So communities like St. John, Dyer, and Schererville, they're growing fast, but we need to make sure that stormwater runoff has someplace to go. Also, a big problem in Northwest Indiana is rail crossings. And at busy intersections, we need to re-engineer how those intersections are considered. We can use overpasses, underpasses that'll improve the safety, not only for the crossings, but for emergency vehicles that have to get through those crossings when there's a train sitting on the tracks. So we need the railroads to kick in for these developments. And then, we were just talking about an NFL franchise. How is that going to affect the traffic flow in Northwest Indiana in our already congested highways? Um, it's inevitable that these developments are going to increase traffic, and maybe there's ways to develop better mass transit infrastructure. That's something that we need to look into. Uh, and just making sure that all of us in Northwest Indiana, all of our legislators are on the same page and working with our downstate counterparts to make sure that our region is not overlooked in Indianapolis.
Lake County has a long history of industrial pollution alongside environmental resilience. How would you approach environmental protection and public health while still protecting union jobs tied to industry and energy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Environmental protection, industry, and union jobs are not a zero sum game here. The pollutants that industry in Lake County creates affects the workers that are working in those facilities and our communities. Engineering environmental protections creates good jobs and often good union jobs. For too long, our state legislators tied the hands of IDEM, the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. We need to be putting people over profits. It's the industries are making money hand over fist right now. They should be investing that money in their people. They should be investing that money in making our communities safe. And we need to untie the hands of the Department of Environmental Management so that they can enforce, making our area here sustainable for future generations. We've got this beautiful big Lake Michigan that borders Northwest Indiana, and the last thing we need to be doing is spoiling that water. So, yeah, there's not a conflict here. Well, the conflict comes into play when corporations again capture our state government. We need to put people over profits and make sure that our in our neighborhoods, our communities, and our workers are protected.
Public education funding remains a flashpoint in Indiana politics. How do current state policies affect schools in District 1, and what changes would you advocate to better support teachers, students, and working families?
Well, our state legislature creates unfunded mandates for public schools. They have to have special education, and they have to uh, do programs for every student. But then they divert the funding to alternative schools that don't have to do those things. So we need to stop diverting public school resources to private and charter schools. The Republicans in this state have been trying to destroy public education. We must reverse that. We need teachers pay that attracts the best teachers. And the best way to do that is to, loosen the binds on the unionization for teachers in this state, and allow them to negotiate over pay and classroom size, and the uh, overall effects of how they are able to teach, right? We want our teachers to be free to teach the curriculums, and to be the conditions that they are teaching in is the conditions that our children are learning in, and we need to make their conditions the best that they possibly can be, and stop diverting funds from our public schools to private and charter schools.
Healthcare access and cost hit working families hard, especially those who fall into gaps between employer coverage and public programs. What role should the state play in expanding access to affordable healthcare communities like Highland and Griffith?
Well, I'm a big proponent of Medicare for all. Now that should be done nationally, but if a state can get started with it, uh, you know, other states will join in. Right now, we're not in a place in Indiana where we're going to be able to get that passed, but I think we need to keep talking about it. I have a great union contract with great health care, but my son is an entrepreneur down in Indianapolis area, and he's struggling to make ends meet. And part of the things that he cuts is his health care, uh, and that's not right. Uh, Everybody should have a right to health care that's every bit as good as what I enjoy because of my union contract. Um, And if we get Medicare for all, it's going to take that cost off the books for companies, and it's going to take it out of the negotiations so that we can negotiate over better pay. So that's one thing that I would uh, embrace is a Medicare for all type of system. But in the meantime, we could at the very least expand access to Medicaid so that we could shrink that coverage gap and allow more people to take advantage of Medicaid.
Now, what I've heard so many different ways of approaching this. Universal healthcare and Medicaid for all, they're different systems. But they all have to be funded. How do you fund a system like that without hindering working families?
Yeah, the we're already paying. Uh, you know the insurance costs in this country are just going through the roof. So we're already paying it, but we're not getting the coverage that we should have. There's, in countries that have Medicare for all, or, some type of universal healthcare system, uh, medical bankruptcies are unheard of, but that's the largest percentage of bankruptcies in this country. So again, we're already paying it. It's just how do we want to approach that, paying those costs.
Indiana's preemption laws often limit what local governments can do. Where do you stand on restoring more local control in towns like Schererville and St. John can make decisions that fit their communities?
Well, the Republicans just passed another preemption law. Senate Bill 76 expands local cooperation with federal authorities and penalizes noncompliance. In essence, forcing local municipalities to cooperate when our communities are under attack with the current climate of invasions of ICE and border protection. They've used these laws to prevent local governments also from increasing minimum wages and improving worker protections. It's time to give local control back to municipal governments. The governments that are closest to the people that they serve are the ones that do the best job of serving them. And if they're not doing the best job, it's the easiest ones for local citizenry to take over and realign to meet their needs.
Reproductive health care has become a defining issue for many voters. How do Indiana's current abortion laws impact families in District 1? And what would you fight for or against at the State House?
Yeah, our state's restrictions on women's reproductive rights is downright dangerous. It's leading to doctors being afraid to treat patients with a pregnancy crisis. I believe women have the right to privacy in their medical decisions. Indiana ranks 35th, the 35th worst state in maternal mortality rates and 37th worst in infant mortality rates. And this is doing nothing to help that crisis. Um, if we're going to be pro-life, we have to be uh, pro-healthcare for women. And our state is just getting worse and worse at it. We need people that are going to fight back against these restrictions on women's health. And I'm going to be voting to lift the restrictions on women's health.
Northwest Indiana voters often feel the legislature priorities ideology over accountability. How would you approach transparency, ethics, and accountability different from the current supermajority?
Well, I have some practice at this. I was at the forefront of fighting for ethics and transparency in my union. The UAW had come under a corruption scandal where we had the corporations bribing our union officials. And we fought to change the system so that we could bring ethics and transparency to the union. I'm going to bring that same vigor for fighting against corruption and bringing transparency and ethics and accountability to our state government. But that's never a solo project. We need citizens in the media like you, like what you're doing, Derek, with Hold Them Accountable, to hold everyone accountable, to hold our elected officials accountable. So it's projects like yours, and I will put people over politics. I will put people over profits with every decision that I have to make as a legislator.
Finally, on a personal level, why now? What do you want voters in Highland, Griffith, Schererville, and St. John to know about how you'd represent them when the cameras are off and the votes get hard?
Well, I've long been a proponent of working class people getting involved with politics, with the political process. I've been an activist in my community. I've been an activist in my union. And when the opportunity for serving the public came in front of me, I decided to take it up. I discussed it with my wife, and we decided that we needed to bring kitchen table sensibility to the legislative process. Uh, I know that it's a struggle to put food on the table. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to fight corporate greed. I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant. And that's how I've approached my union work. That's how I will approach legislative decisions. Again, putting people over profits, putting people over politics is just the approach that I'm going to bring to the Indiana State Senate.
All right, Scott, we've talked about the district, the issues, and the stakes. Now it's time to put some cards on the table. This is our hold 'em or fold 'em round. I'm going to read a statement. If you agree, you say hold 'em. If you don't, you say fold 'em. No long explanations. Let's see where you stand. Local governments should have more control over zoning and development than State House.
Hold 'em.
Indiana should fully fund public schools before expanding the voucher programs.
Hold 'em.
Union labor protections in Indiana need to be strengthened, not weakened.
Absolutely hold 'em.
Reproductive health care decisions belong between patients and doctors, not politicians.
Hold 'em.
Property tax relief should prioritize homeowners and seniors over corporate incentives.
Hold 'em.
Environmental regulation should not be rolled back for industrial convenience.
Hold 'em.
Indiana should raise the minimum wage to a living wage tied to inflation.
Long past overdue. Hold 'em.
The state should invest more in public transportation and rail infrastructures in Northwest Indiana.
Hold 'em.
Healthcare access is a right, not a privilege.
Hold it.
Lawmakers should be barred from voting on legislation that directly benefits their own financial interest.
Absolutely hold 'em.
Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to thank Scott for joining us today. Running for office isn't easy, especially in a district as diverse and fast-changing as Indiana's first state Senate district. It takes time, it takes courage, and it takes a willingness to show up and answer tough questions. Scott, we appreciate you taking the time to be here, putting your ideas on the record. What you heard today isn't just about party labels or campaign slogans. It's about real communities, Highland, Griffith, Schererville, St. John, and the people who live, work, raise families, and build futures there. It's about whether state government listens to working families, respects local voices, and acts with accountability instead of ideology. At Hold 'em Accountable, our job isn't to tell you what to think. Our job is to make sure candidates show up, explain where they stand, and own their positions plainly and publicly. Democracy works best when voters are informed, engaged, and empowered to ask better questions. So, whether you agreed with everything you heard today or not, the important thing is you're paying attention because the decisions made in Indianapolis have very real consequences right here at home. Scott, thank you again for being here. And to everyone watching or listening, this conversation doesn't end here. So stay informed, ask questions, and as always, hold them accountable.